Well, welcome everyone to the Virtuous Artificial Intelligence International Online Conference centered on Seoul, Korea, within its neighboring 3 time zones. I'm Bob Russell, the founder of CTNS and GTU Emeritus Professor of Theology and Science. So I'm officially retired, but not yet. I'm very grateful to the John Temple Foundation for the grant supporting BEI, and to my close colleague and dear friend, Dr. Braden Mullick, who now holds the Ian G. Barber Chair in Theology, Science, and expanded to include now Ethics and Technology at CTNS GTU. Braden and I worked very closely together on creating the BEI project, and he is now the project director. I wish all of you a most stimulating conference and a great success with the many publications, both scholarly and for the general public, which promise to emerge from our work here together. Braden, it's all yours.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Yeah, this project was in the works for a couple years, and we're really excited because we think that we read the news daily and we think of how timely and important the questions that we're wrestling with are. So this is the second of 3 online conferences we're doing this summer. Each of them has sort of been based in a different time zone. JTF and we were both interested in having a wide variety of perspectives, and some initial plans for the conference or for the grant would have included in-person conferences, but financial constraints and with COVID, it just seemed to be a little more efficient to move things online, but to still keep these geographic centerings to allow a broader perspective and more participants actually to be able to be a part of the conferences. So thank you all for being here, being a part of this. The schedule you should have seen in the email. It's also on the website, but we'll have half-hour blocks for each of our participants to be able to share their work and to have conversation amongst the panelists here in the webinar. There will be also time for general questions where we can sort of have discussion between the different papers and also questions from the attendees on the webinar. You can use the question and answer box if you have questions that if you think of them as a presenter is presenting, that way you don't have to remember them or hold on to them, and we'll try and direct people's attention there and try and answer them. And that way we can sort of cultivate some questions ahead of time and keep things pretty concise. So the presentations will be about 10 minutes. If you start to run over that, I'll sort of give you a countdown with my hand in terms of a couple minutes. But hopefully people have had a chance to read the papers. Really gives us a chance to then have a meaningful dialogue about the work. Bob and some of our colleagues developed this sort of format in person with a collaboration with the Vatican Observatory. And this is the first time that we've sort of taken this model into a hybrid or an online format. So we're still learning, and we'll get some feedback, especially the last day of the conference when we have some time to talk and reflect. But we found that things worked pretty well for the first conference we had in June. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with our first presentation, who is Susan Kennedy, currently assistant professor of philosophy at Santa Clara University nearby here. And she was also previously a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard University, working with the embedded ethics CS team to integrate ethical reasoning into computer science curriculum. Thank you very much, Susan.
Well, thank you. Actually, that's how I want to start, since this is the first presentation. Thank you very much for the organizers for putting all this together. I'm really looking forward to the conference and being able to talk about everyone's papers. So my paper is titled Recommender Systems as a Threat to Spontaneous Freedom. And so when I was thinking about this, given how broad the term AI is, I really wanted to focus on a specific application of AI for this paper, namely recommender systems. And these have become prevalent in the last few decades, and they play a really influential role, I think, in shaping our experiences and interactions on and offline, right? They recommend products to purchase, suggest places to visit, people to connect with, and even books, music, and other kinds of content for us to experience. But what I find interesting is how widely accepted their development and use has become. So there's been various ethical issues that have been identified, such as bias and privacy and transparency, but this has really only given way to a trend in the literature in terms of how we should think about how to more responsibly design these systems. And underlying this trend, there seems to be this assumption that ultimately these systems are necessary and desirable. So the question that doesn't seem to be receiving as much attention is whether there's actually more fundamental ethical issues here, ones that can't just be addressed by responsible design practices, but might actually suggest that we should minimize the use of these systems altogether. So I start the paper by examining some of the motivating factors behind this kind of rise of recommender systems. And a common theme that emerged was people who were framing recommender systems as a solution to the problem of information overload. So the idea here is that users are confronted with this overwhelming amount of options and choices and possibilities online, and recommender systems are thought to be uniquely positioned to address this because they help people more effectively navigate the online space. But on closer inspection, I came to the conclusion that the problem of information overload is misunderstood, and this has maybe led the value and the necessity of these systems to be overestimated. So I consider a few accounts of how information overload could be conceptualized as a problem, and I show that recommender systems might not actually offer a solution in the way that it's been thought. So for example, if we think information overload is about users' attention being captured online in a way that's detrimental to their well-being, then increasing user engagement online in the way that recommender systems do only exacerbates this problem, right? They improve individuals' abilities to engage with more and more information, but they don't actually provide individuals with a sanctuary characterized by like time away from this kind of obsession with finding and processing more information. But I actually want to go further than this and say that these systems aren't just unnecessary, they might also be undesirable. So in the third section of the paper, I consider whether there's any reasons to prefer the absence or minimization of recommender systems. And I argue that there is, because the excessive amount of information and content online might actually be a good thing. And the reason I think is that it transforms individuals into the state of openness and receptivity to an unstructured online space. And this is what makes it possible for us to experience spontaneous freedom. So this idea of spontaneous freedom has a few defining features. One of them is openness. So individuals should feel like there's possibilities available to them and there's some degree of uncertainty about what the future holds. So they should feel like there's this broad horizon of possibilities that hasn't been settled by previous deliberation and planning, either by themselves or by other people. But I think recommender systems fail this criteria. The primary function of these systems is to accurately predict the user's interests and preferences so that relevant content can be queued up for users and ready to go. But as a result, users experience this range of possibilities, but one that they experience as a result of previous deliberation and planning on behalf of the algorithm. And additionally, I think these systems prevent users from experiencing the future as uncertain, which is one of those things we need for that openness. With content filtering techniques, for example, it's pretty easy to anticipate what kinds of suggestions the algorithm might offer. So like if you're on Amazon searching for a vacuum, then you can easily guess that the recommender system on Amazon is going to show you other kinds of vacuum brands and models for you to purchase. The second defining criterion of spontaneous freedom is non-alienation. So the idea here is that individuals should be able to identify with the source of their activity. So we should be able to claim authorship, even if we experience our activity as like a reprieve from our identity as a rational agent with fixed ends. And I think recommender systems fail here as well. So in one case, you might think of this phenomenon of going down the rabbit hole, which Zeynep Tufekci's talked about in relation to YouTube's platform. So this refers to this case where someone goes on YouTube and they start watching puppy videos, and then 3 hours later, they're watching extremist content and they're confused and alienated and wondering, like, how did I end up here? Alternatively, and I think maybe a more interesting case, is where individuals can end up feeling alienated despite the fact that it's their own preferences that's being used to inform the content that they're seeing from the algorithm. So the individual's identity, as it's interpreted by the algorithm, it's constantly being reflected back to them as the system's making predictions based on their preferences and past behavior. And so that this ends up creating this kind of boomerang effect where the individual is unable to experience any kind of reprieve from their own identity. And I think this can also lead to feelings of alienation because we don't get any kind of relief from being caught up in these activities of planning and rational deliberation. And it's really, I think, harder for us to see ourselves as being continuous with nature or with other people. So based on this analysis, I say it looks like recommender systems are incompatible with us experiencing spontaneous freedom online. And we should care about this because it's this kind of freedom that allows us to realize important values like creativity, originality, and novelty. In the next session, I anticipate maybe one of the main sort of criticisms of my view. And so I'm saying, look, these systems, we should minimize them because we want to preserve spontaneous freedom. But other people say, well, actually, these systems are good because it seems like they offer us more freedom. And doesn't this seem like a contradiction? So some people, I think, argue that these systems liberate us because they relieve us of these kinds of burdens and calls for engagement. They essentially automate this task that we would otherwise do of seeking guidance and recommendations, right? So if you have a bunch of restaurants in a list and you're trying to figure out where to go for dinner, you might ask a friend like, oh, which one would you recommend? We don't have to do that kind of stuff when we have recommender systems that automate that task for us. But while I think this kind of liberation promised by these systems seems desirable, I draw on Albert Borgman's work and his arguments that technologies have a tendency to make our lives more shallow by reducing that kind of skill and effort that's required to accomplish tasks. And this can ultimately lead to a loss of meaning and purpose in life as people become more disconnected from both the physical and social world around them. So in short, recommender systems might make our lives easier, but they don't actually offer us more freedom in a meaningful way. And then in the last part of this paper, I consider the implications of my argument. So one of the main themes or questions for this workshop was about how AI and cultural evolution, specifically like, will the integration of AI into society influence the evolution of human culture? And my concern is that the widespread use of these systems might actually inhibit cultural evolution by sacrificing that kind of spontaneity in favor of more structure in the online space. So recommender systems generate personalized recommendations on the basis of data that's been previously collected. And so individuals might end up discovering new content, but this nevertheless proceeds in this kind of predictable fashion that conforms to a pre-established identity or an agent's predetermined ends. And by imposing structure in the online space in this way, I think what recommender systems are doing is prioritizing predictability and continuity at the expense of users being able to experience spontaneous freedom. And so without creating that kind of breathing room necessary for freedom to flourish, I think users end up losing out on opportunities to experience creativity and novelty and that kind of self-reimagining. So like you can just think of a plant and its roots when you buy a plant at the store and you pull it out of the tiny container that it comes in, you see all of the roots squished together with nowhere to go. I think this is what happens when we don't allow space for spontaneous things to happen. We get squished and eventually stop growing. So in order to grow and evolve as a society, we need that kind of space and breathing room to be preserved. So in short, I think it's spontaneous freedom that's really important for driving cultural evolution because it's something that stimulates change and novelty and originality as opposed to preserving continuity. And so I think the widespread use of recommender systems doesn't just threaten to maybe transfer cultural evolution into the hands of AI. I actually think it's a more serious concern where these systems maybe threaten to stop cultural evolution altogether because they eliminate that kind of breathing room. So that's the main idea for the paper. And I'm really looking forward to questions and talking about it more with all of you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think there was a thread running through a number of papers about sort of digging deeper into sort of the underlying assumptions in some of the questions, and even just reflectively thinking about, is technology worth pursuing in the ways that we just are tending to just let it go? But yeah, if people have questions, now is a time to start. Otherwise, I can take moderator privilege and ask a question myself. Yeah, Rachel.
That was a really great paper. I just wanted to pick up towards the end of your paper where you raised a possible objection, where you say, oh, doesn't automation help us? I wondered if there's another route that people try to argue in favor of recommender systems. So it's not so much that automation frees us in terms of workload, but in terms of maybe a feeling of social isolation. Because, for example, maybe nobody that you know reads the books or listens to the music that you listen to, or maybe doesn't have the political views or something like that. And people might see this kind of automation not as a way to reduce dependence on others per se, but just as a way to reach out of a community that they might feel trapped in. I wondered if you could maybe speak to the dynamics of freedom in those kind of cases.
Yeah, this is a really good question. And I think you did a nice job kind of articulating one of the concerns I've had, but like haven't been able to quite put my finger on, because it seems like there's these cases where there really are just these kinds of contradictions, right? Like I'm saying maybe it closes us off or separates us, you know, even in that one, the way I frame the critique currently, it's like, oh, well, it maybe separates us from the social world or the physical world. And it's like, well, actually, here's this case where it seems like for someone who's maybe in a really rural area and, you know, they're gay and looking for an LGBT community, and that's not something that's available like locally for them, well, then it's great when you can go on a social media platform and it's recommending groups and people for you to engage with. So I think you're absolutely right. And this is, I don't yet know how to really address this, because I think it is a real concern and it's a different one than the one that I address in the paper, right? Like this idea of maybe it actually does do these really good things for us, especially because I kind of go this more radical approach with what I'm trying to argue, which is like, we should minimize the use or maybe abolish them altogether. And I don't know if that's for like, maybe that's going too far. Like I want to be able to acknowledge that there are, I think, maybe these benefits of the systems. And that's, I think, something specific for recommender systems. That's a like potential benefit or value that they have. And so is it, you know, if now I'm in the position of saying, but we have spontaneous freedom, do we weigh that then against these other benefits? I think that becomes a much harder thing to do, but I think you're right. Like I need to think about these kinds of cases to have a more nuanced approach, because the one I have now is kind of a bit more on the extreme and taking things in these like big chunks and steps. But yeah, I wish I had a better response to that, but I think it's just a really hard challenge that I haven't thought of a way to respond to yet.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you do have the resources to pick your way through it. I feel like there's something in your notion of freedom that can maybe differentiate between these kind of cases. So yeah, I'd really love to see more of
Well,
that.
I'll take your optimism and I'll hope that helps me find a way to answer it.
Yeah, Soraj.
Yes, thanks a lot, Susan, for the talk, and I enjoyed it a lot. I was thinking about Netflix and its recommending system while I was listening to your talk, and whatever kind of movie I was watching, I was kind of given by similar kinds of movie, and sometimes that's a bit annoying because I want to go to the movies of my own choice, not by the choice of Netflix. But my question is about the extent to which individual can have their own control with regards to recommender system. I mean, when I was given the choices given by Netflix, I don't want to follow their recommendation system. I want to go to my own choice. So I wonder what you think about the control that individuals have with regards to this. I mean, there can be these recommendation systems, but people can just override them. What do you think about that?
Yeah, okay, so I realized I had an unpopular view as I started working on this paper and talking to people about it, because I was like, wow, a lot of people like kind of like these systems. And if they don't really like them, they're like, well, yeah, I actually don't like the Spotify or Netflix recommendations, but then I just ignore them, right? So then they're like, well, what's really the harm? Because we have this system, but if I don't want to follow the recommendations, I don't have to. There's nothing forcing me to actually take any of these recommendations up, in which case, is the way I presented the problem just way too strong? Because you might think, well, this really hasn't limited people's spontaneous freedom. If they don't want that, then they can just ignore the recommendations and go about what they were going to do anyways. And so I feel like I have to say something that kind of speaks to the way in which, because we've been presented these options, it does maybe change things for us, even just maybe the subjective experience of it, where it's now you have to make this decision or choice to ignore the recommendations or having seen them already, right? Or maybe it's the fact that they're kind of pre-packaged and on the shelf just there for you, that ease of like how, you know, quickly, and usually it's optimized on platforms to make it such that like even auto queuing, like sometimes Netflix doesn't even ask or give you the options. It just starts playing the next episode, or YouTube will just start playing the next video. In these cases, like, does that actually threaten spontaneous freedom in that way, just in virtue of having the options there, even if they could be ignored, but by having to take that extra step, does that kind of diminish in some way? But I think, you know, in general, since I've written this paper, I've realized I kind of need to tone down a lot of the kinds of, you know, the argument I'm trying to make and how sort of radical it is or like strong it is, because I think these are some like serious objections. And I think users ultimately do have control, but maybe a little bit less when they're faced with recommendations, even if they can ignore them.
Jung-hyun.
And thank you very much for the talk. I really enjoyed it. And overall, I find your arguments quite convincing, especially your argument based upon spontaneous freedom. I like the concept, spontaneous freedom, especially when you mentioned the British Library in London. I think at that point I was persuaded, and that was very impressive. And at the same time, I came to another thought that I can enjoy the library, but I think my parents will not. So I wonder whether your argument apply for some people, not everyone. So how do you think about that? And that's my first question. And the second question is about your, you mentioned the ranking system versus the recommendation system, right? And can you explain a little bit more about the differences? And I wonder whether you have any questions or ethical problems with the ranking system as well. You just mentioned about some issues with the recommendation system. So this is my second question.
Okay, I'll start with the second question first. So the difference between the ranking and recommender systems, I thought it was important to tease these apart because it seems like they get talked about kind of lumped together in one category, but it seems like, you know, technically there's something different going on with the two systems. I think I have a more favorable view of ranking systems than I do of recommender systems. Ranking to me seems more important or maybe more necessary in some circumstances. So for instance, when you type in something in Google search results, well, you know, based on the size of the screen and how big the font is, there's only like 6 or 7 options that are going to show up just on that first thing before you have to start scrolling or going to the next pages of options. And so of course there has to be some order to that list. So why not prefer that that list has been ordered in a way where it's like, well, hey, we use the algorithm to try and figure out which of these options would be the most relevant to you. That to me seems actually kind of useful. Whereas recommender systems are kind of like, to me, feel like an imposition, right? Like I haven't asked for these recommendations, but instead they show up there and there's a spot dedicated to them on a platform. And so I think the problems I have, at least, you know, with spontaneous freedom are really specific to the recommender systems as opposed to the ranking systems themselves. There, I think there are some values. And then in terms of thinking about kind of the sort of individual experiences of spontaneous freedom, like when do we feel it and when do we not? And I think, yeah, it's going to really differ. For like an academic or someone who loves books, like walking into a library with tons of books is awesome. And like, you know, your jaw drops, you're like, wow, look at all these possibilities. And then if someone can't read and they walk into the library, they're kind of like, oh, you know, they're not going to have that same kind of joy when they see all of these books on the shelves because it does nothing for them. They're not really possibilities in a meaningful sense. So I think a lot of what makes an experience of spontaneous freedom for a particular individual is going to depend a lot on kind of their interest and their capacities and their abilities, such that like they actually perceive it, even if just subjectively, as possibilities, as opposed to something else or not really even possibilities for them at all. And then, yeah, it gets difficult when I start thinking about the online space, just because so much we can do online now, right? Like we're even doing this conference online. Like you can have books and videos and music and art and all these things hosted online. And so it would almost be easier, I think, if I was focusing on an example that was like more particular to a kind of topic or subject, and yet even limiting it to recommender systems, you're still talking about recommendations of what? Well, like everything, because you can pretty much almost have everything online. And so I think that there's going to be tons of variability then, I think, in like what that means for individuals and how and whether or not they experience spontaneous freedom. And I guess the other thing I'll add is that these experiences of spontaneous freedom, I think when it goes well, we experiencing it positively, right? Like it's a good experience that you want to have, that feeling of like, oh, look at all of these options. What am I going to do? I don't know. But I think it can also be not a positive experience. Like it could be in some ways like leading to these kinds of feelings of like ennui or something else, right? I think it's still valuable in those cases, even though it doesn't have the sort of positive emotional valence of bringing like joy or excitement about the possibilities. And so then that makes it especially complicated, I think, to then argue and say, well, both of those are meaningful, even if you're like uncomfortable in some cases of experiencing this. Because I'm basically saying that you're like, yeah, you should be uncomfortable, and that's important, and that's a good value we should preserve. Like there, I think people's intuitions might pull them further away from what I'm trying to argue, but I think it's something important that I should probably like say more about in the paper.
Okay. Oh, thank you for the answer.
Yeah, so my question sort of stems from some work that I was doing in my paper for the Berkeley conference, where I like to think of trying to use technology in ways that we didn't necessarily think. So for instance, instead of using sentencing algorithms to look at how to deal with an individual, a perpetrator, I read a study where they were then trying to flip it on its head and say, well, how likely is it that somebody coming into the legal system is going to be discriminated against by the legal system? And so I'm wondering, is there something similar we can do with a recommender system in the sense of trying to not create an echo chamber, but can we do it in a way that increases perspectives that you wouldn't normally see? And is there a way to try and do that without stepping on spontaneous freedom in a way that can be done with openness and non-alienation?
Oh man, okay. So that's gonna, I would love to think about this more. I feel like the position and the perspective you're coming from reminds me of Kevin Kelly, who has this idea of like, there's no bad technologies, we just have to relocate them, right? Like DDT, bad for crops, but maybe good for like preventing mosquitoes around homes. So he thinks like we should always be trying to think about, well, how could we design the technology such that it actually aligns and fits with us better? And maybe the way recommender systems are now, well, that's a problem, and for the reasons I've described, but maybe there's a way of doing it, or there's a way of using them in a really creative way. I actually hadn't heard of that case of like the kind of predpol, or not predpol, the compass algorithm being used in that way to like predict how likely someone would be discriminated against. Yeah, so I'm really torn about this because part of me wants, because I guess part of the motivation when I was thinking of this paper was like, it seems like everyone's thinking about how can we more responsibly design these systems, but maybe I should be more careful in thinking about, well, there's a different question of like responsibly designing them, but also a question of like relocating them, maybe giving them a slightly different task than we've envisioned. So not just like, let's address privacy concerns by like, changing these ways that we build the algorithms, but instead thinking like, well, how could we use recommender systems? And maybe it looks quite different than how we're using them now on online platforms. As to whether there's a way of doing this, I mean, so I thought about this a little when I came across some of these recommendations where some people were saying that we could program or design recommender systems for serendipity. So not spontaneity, but serendipity, which I think is very close in the way that they were using the term, right? So, kind of, I think it was motivated by this problem of filter bubbles. Look, we end up getting kind of shoehorned into these little echo chambers and bubbles. Maybe how do we pop those bubbles? How do we diversify the content? How do we kind of surprise users? Like, what's that balance between still having relevant content such that the systems are useful, but also not making it such that people just end up kind of trapped into these smaller and smaller bubbles? And there was something weird to me about the proposal of like programming serendipity insofar as it's like, if I run into my favorite actor at a coffee shop, like that's serendipitous. But if I follow my favorite actor for weeks and figure out their daily routine, and I'm like, oh, they really like going to the roasted bean at 8 a.m. on Fridays, and then I show up and go, oh, isn't it serendipitous that I ran into here? It no longer feels serendipitous. And so it really got me to start thinking about like, yeah, that kind of serendipity or spontaneity, like I might need to think more about that concept and whether it's actually possible to is that something that we could program algorithms for, or is it actually just a sort of incoherent concept to think that we could achieve the thing that I'm after by designing the systems? And I think like that's maybe a foundational question I should answer, because it will determine whether I should be saying, well, should we minimize or abolish these systems? Am I actually more in line with the people who are saying, well, we just have to find a better way to design the systems? Because if it's possible, then I think I'm actually closer aligned to them than I initially presented in the paper as it's written now.
Wilson?
My question is, actually, I wrote a similar paper on a recommendation system algorithm previously, and I generally agree with you that this has some problem. But I think my question is, I'm not sure whether we could just distinguish ranking system and recommender system so clearly, because in general, all kind of search engines are kind of recommending system. And there are different degrees of recommending. So there are some recommender system that, particularly, point at you and, analyze you and give the answer that you will probably want. But there are some more general type of recommender system like Google search engines, which information comes first. And there are some, we all know that there are some differences when two people search for the same words, the different people might get different answers, right? And Netflix system, there are several options of, already. It is ranking in a sense, right? You don't see just one movie, but there are some, several movies that you might choose. And there is a ChatGPT, and when it develops further, it might give you just the answer that it will give nobody else but you. So there are very specific kind of recommender system, but there are general kinds of recommender system, and that they might be different. And the problem is that the second one, the more loose recommender system, might be almost necessary because there are so much information on the net. On the internet. So if just imagine the situation that all this recommender system is abolished, then there are like millions of options that you have, and you need to choose one of this, which is nearly impossible. And that's why Google earned so much money. So it provided you the information that you might want to have. So I think that there's some of matters of degree that a recommender system and which recommender system that you do not agree with.
Yeah, so I think that's right, that there's like some considerable overlap between the ranking systems and the recommender systems, right? Because usually even within a recommender system, you then have algorithmic ranking. Like they don't just give you options, they've now ranked those options based on relevance even then. And so there's ways in which they kind of overlap. I think it was interesting how you suggested maybe like we might, I think a lot of the examples that usually come to mind, like Netflix and Amazon and YouTube, were used to recommender systems, like I guess creating a space of options for us. But then with the ChatGPT example, you're like, yeah, but maybe we'll actually get to the point where the recommendation is just like, here is the recommendation. It's actually just a singular one. And what does that mean? And how is that different? I haven't thought about that before, so I don't know that I have much to say, but I definitely want to read your paper and see what you've written about this already and think about that question more, like, because I think kind of try and maybe more sharply or artificially separate them in the paper, because I had seen them being blended together too often, and maybe I went too far in that direction because, well, there are ways in which they're kind of like often used together or maybe accomplishing similar things. And so I'll have to go back because, that question came up earlier as well, kind of thinking about recommender versus ranking systems. How different are they? And would I similarly have problems with ranking systems? And I initially thought no, but the more the more this comes up, I'm thinking I actually have to revisit that and see if there's maybe similar issues with the ranking systems, because I kind of like separated those out of the critique that I have in the paper. So I think I'll just have to revisit that and get back to you with a better answer.
Thank you.
Levi.
Thank you for this interesting talk. I apologize if this is something you already mentioned. My reception came in and out for a while, so I'm finally here. I think I heard you mentioning this scenario when Rachel asked about her question. You mentioned perhaps an LGBT person in a rural area can find some benefit to a ranking system. And actually, this brings to mind actually one of the potential great risks that goes beyond just having our choices sort of curated for us, and that is that there's some stuff that we may be looking for, information we're seeking, that we don't want algorithms dictating to us. So an LGBT person living on their own in a rural area might find this useful. An LGBT teen living in a conservative home environment may not want those ads to pop up on their social media for fairly obvious reasons. And I think this is one of the great risks, actually, of these kind of ranking systems, is that if they know what you tend to look for, this limits potential for privacy. So if I'm trying to present myself in public in a very particular way, that information, is that I don't present in public is known by the ranking system and can appear in very particular circumstances where I may not want it to appear.
Oh, yes. So this is the other side of the coin from the first question. Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. And I hadn't considered that scenario. So there's both the benefit and a serious risk there. And maybe they're kind of like directly in competition. I mean, yeah, so in these cases, I think one thing that doesn't come out in the paper, but I've kind of been thinking more about since then is this idea of like being able to experience that reprieve from our own identity, or at least maybe do things more on our own terms. And I guess I found this paper really difficult to write. I guess I'll just say that, because it's like a new paper, a new project I'm working on. And I feel like strongly about it. And yet when I try and put words to the paper, I feel like it doesn't quite capture like what concerns I have. So it's still a work in progress. But one of the things motivating it and that I've been thinking about is this way in which, like people have talked about filter bubbles. And I agree, like those are a concern, but then just the idea that we have these systems that really do have this influential role, and to the point where like we kind of are always being confronted with or imposed upon, have these choices and being steered and being directed. And it leaves not a lot of room for individuals, and it also, by virtue of that, leaves not a lot of room for like societies to kind of see these different things evolve and change and develop, because it's kind of eliminated that breathing room and space. And I think what your example is making me think of are these kinds of cases where, yeah, someone's like had that maybe taken out of their control. And I guess it ties into one of the other questions, right? How much control do users have over these recommendations? There's a sense in which we can ignore them, but maybe this example is showing us like, well, simply ignoring them isn't always an option, right? And this is a very like loaded example where it's like, yeah, even just having the recommendation there is a problem, even if someone doesn't follow through or click on it. And so, maybe speaking to the problem, like just in virtue of those options being present in that way, there can be a problem there. And so maybe that's a helpful example to kind of like start showing those kinds of cases, why that happens. Yeah, thank you. That's a helpful case to think about.
To think about for now, but I think we'll move on to our next presentation, which is from Soraj Hongladarom, who's a research fellow at the Center for Science, Technology, and Society at Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok, Thailand. He's also the author of The Ethics of AI and Robotics, a Buddhist Viewpoint by Lexington. Thank you very much for being
thanks
here.
a lot. Thanks a lot. So I have some slides to show, and thanks a lot for having me here. I enjoyed it a lot already. Okay, so unlike Susan, I don't have a specific point to make in this paper. In the paper, I intended to answer all the three questions that were given us by Bob and by the conference organizer. So, however, the questions are based on my current thinking on the subject. So here are the three questions. We all know them, and let's go to the first question: evolution of culture. My take on this is that first of all, we can start by looking at the term culture, and the term culture is normally used in two senses. And the first one is the humanistic or artistic sense. You know, there is a lot of culture in Bangkok, for example. People go to museums, art exhibitions, concert halls, and so on. And there is the anthropological sense, which means it's a sum total of what people believe and values and think about. So perhaps when we talk about cultural evolution, the latter sense is more interesting for me, and I kind of focus my answer to the question in this context. And AI has been used to influence our thoughts and beliefs, that's for sure. And, you know, we have heard Susan talks about the recommendation system, and that is one way among very many that AI has been used to influence our thoughts and beliefs. And as our thoughts and beliefs, of course, comprise our culture. So yes, AI does influence our culture, but in what way? I think that is the question we would like to talk about, to discuss. So this pertains directly with the issue of cultural evolution. So here is a paragraph from my paper where I kind of, you know, think about this issue. The proposal is that we need to find a way for a fruitful and peaceful coexistence with AI. The terrifying scenarios proposed by Stephen Hawking or Elon Musk of AI taking over our species is still one possible scenario, perhaps far into the future, if at all. But we have the power right now not to allow this to happen. Also, I believe, also I want to argue. I think the only way we can do this is to develop AI systems which are ethical. That is when AI advances, so must its ethical apparatus. So the two must go hand in hand. And I kind of developed this idea more fully in the book that Braden just mentioned earlier. So we humans are teaching AI many things. So, and we must teach them ethics too. In other words, AI must become virtuous. Perhaps this is the only way we can coexist peacefully and productively with it. And the idea, of course, is how, right? How to program or to teach AI virtues. I mean, we can teach them many things, but how we can teach them to become virtuous, that's the big question. And we can take the recommendation system as an example. We can factor in the need for individual autonomy and space for freedom, and find a way that the recommendation does not need to be like pushy, but kind of more like a nudge, just perhaps you might want to see this and that kind of thing. So giving, but of course there can be the systematic critique of the whole idea that we just talked about. So can AI really become virtuous? This is our urgent task that we just talked about. I just mentioned. The trick is that to become virtuous, one needs not be conscious. So, AI system can be virtuous right now, because AI system doesn't have to be conscious in order to possess virtues or to be virtuous. So the reason is because the problem of consciousness is much more intractable than the problem of virtue. So I think it's much harder to design or to program an AI system to become conscious, because, you know, frankly, philosophers, scientists, they do not actually know as of now what consciousness consists of, and you know, what is the cause of consciousness. And since we don't know that, how can we like produce a machine, a system that can become conscious? But I think the problem of virtue is easier in that we can have a list of virtues. You know, virtues are just properties that we want to have in a system, like, you know, they function properly, they don't break down easily, and so on. So in that case, we can put those properties into the system, so as to make it virtuous, you know, meaning possessing virtues. So we can list a number of virtues and install them in the system. So there are always, you know, unscrupulous and unvirtuous, I think there is such a word, right? Unvirtuous people. I mean, there are people who, instead of installing, you know, the list of properties in the AI system that people normally expect them, and they install another list, so to speak, so that AI become like, you know, instead of creating social equality, for example, or giving people autonomy to the extent that, you know, to the best of their ability, they do the opposite. And that is always a problem, because we have had our ethical system for a long time, but then you know, there have always been people who you know, do not follow the system. So that is always a problem, and we need always to be vigilant and to you know, keep on a lookout. So my take on the second question is yes, and let us go back to the second question. Can AI assist humans in the acquisition of virtue? The answer is a clear yes, because you know, there are many applications of AI that are aimed precisely at achieving this aim. For example, this is I say this is the easiest question. To be able to assist humans in acquiring virtue, AI does not have to be virtuous itself. So it's easier because we are not talking about teaching or programming AI to be virtuous in this sense, but AI can be only a conduit or a medium, so that necessary information, necessary sets of practices can be transmitted in order to teach humans, certain section of human beings, so that they can follow and practice, and as a result, they could become virtuous. So to give you an example, here is a page I copied from a Facebook. The right-hand side is in Thai language, but the picture on the left is not of a real monk. It's a picture of, you know, an AI monk, a virtual monk, as you can see. And the big letter here, it says, you know, how to translate venerable AI, for example, and it's a fun. It's not meant to be absolutely serious, but it's a Facebook page and featuring this venerable AI, and perhaps there are real human beings behind the venerable AI, but we can imagine what could happen in the future where real AI, because right now we have systems like ChatGPT where they can provide real answers to real questions. The web page engage with its users by giving answers to questions about Buddhism and the teachings of the Buddha. And the idea is, on the one hand, it's a fun way. On the other hand, the answers given are like, what we would normally expect when we in Thailand have conversation with real monks, for example. So that is one way, and it's an application of how AI can assist. Right, the key word here is how AI can assist people to become virtuous. Of course, we can talk about whether it's effective or how effective it is, by doing that, but that depends on other factors like the motivation of the students and so on. So another example, a book is not a conscious entity, of course, nor is it virtuous, just a book, but it can instruct people to become virtuous. So this is why I think the second question, can AI assist people to become virtuous, is easy, because we have had this very old form of technology, for many centuries, a book, and it can instruct people to become virtuous. But the book is only a medium. It is humans to put words on it, right? We are a long way from AI who can actually teach us, out of its own understanding, its own wisdom, so to speak, if we can use that word. But what we have now can be good enough. So I'm quite optimistic when it comes to AI and how AI can contribute to a better society. I mean, we have to be really, really careful, of course. And we have to be mindful. We have to be aware of the kind of systematic thinking that is associated with AI, with everything, that philosophers usually talk about when they criticize technology as a whole. So we have to be mindful of that. But I think considering on that, there could be some points where AI could contribute because it's just not just, it's a form of technology, especially when the question is about how AI can assist people to become more virtuous. So please send me signals regarding time. But there's a story here from my paper. I'm not going to read all of this, but just to tell you the story. A master is teaching his students the teaching of the Buddha, and the master does not understand much of the teaching he is giving his students. He just memorized the text and gives the text to the students. But one of his students takes up the text, the teaching of the master, and actually practices it. And in the end, this student becomes an accomplished, he has met the objective of the teaching. He has become an accomplished monk, and after that he went back to the master and actually taught his own master of what he had practiced and had accomplished. So this shows that even the medium, the master, does not understand anything that he is teaching. The result can happen. I mean, the student can listen to the words and actually try to understand and practice it, and can become and you know accomplished student and met all the objectives of the teaching, you know, become released from suffering, that kind of thing. So there's a story. I think this story is more from the Mahayana or Tibetan, because I heard of this story from a book on Tibetan Buddhism. So, but in any case, it is Buddhism. And the third question, we need to be clear what being virtuous means. This is the third question, can AI itself be virtuous? In the original sense, we can talk about a virtuous horse, a virtuous car. This is a very old thinking in the West, you know, dating back, of course, to the Greeks. So in this sense, it is probably okay to talk about a virtuous AI exhibiting virtues, possessing a list of virtues. And virtues are just, you know, properties that we desire a system to have. Much depends on what, of course, we actually mean by virtues. Perhaps there's not much distinction between virtues in the sense of a virtuous horse, you know, as Aristotle says, and in the sense of a virtuous human being. We say a good horse, a good human being. So this means we need to have a rethinking, not much of a rethinking, but looking back toward what is there in this ancient wisdom, and reinterpret and looking at this ancient wisdom, and you know, Buddhism, of course, is included in a new light. You can look at this because I think I have spent quite a lot of time. I asked ChatGPT, you know, whether AI can become virtuous, and this is its answer. While AI itself cannot become virtuous, it can be programmed and designed to behave in ways that align with virtuous principles. Okay, but we humans also have been programmed and designed to behave in ways that aligned with virtuous principles. It's called moral cultivation. So I think I will end my talk here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm reminded how important it is that we sort of say what we mean by virtue in a lot of these conversations, because we come from a variety of perspectives and approaches and ways to think about it. But there's lots of hands up, so let's just dive right into it. Levi?
Yes, thank you. Soraj, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too.
As I was reading your article, your paper, and thinking about what you're saying today, one of the things that strikes me is you do a good job of noting that virtue doesn't necessarily mean moral virtue. But I think this is an important point to sort of grapple with. Because if you were to take the perspective of somebody like Hans Jonas, for example, Hans Jonas isn't exactly an Aristotelian, but many people read him as being a neo-Aristotelian. And he sees as an important distinction between humans or living things and machines. He's talking about cybernetics, which is, of course, a forerunner to AI. And he sees the problem is that how we think of our telos, or the fact that human beings might have a telos, is distinct from machines which have intention programmed into them. And so our end is natural to us as by virtue of being living things, according to Jonas, whereas a torpedo or an AI or what have you is given intention from outside. And so when Aristotle is talking about moral virtue, he's talking about those things which accord to our natural telos. So I think this opens up an important area where you need to sort of be careful about delineating the specifics. A virtuous AI doesn't mean a morally virtuous AI, because the AI does not possess those things that would characterize as a moral agent.
Yes, yes. Thanks a lot, Levi. Perhaps when we analyze the concept of morally virtuous human being, let us look at human being first. We come up with a list of properties like, you know, they are dependable and they don't cheat and so on. So when we teach children to become, like, you know, a dependable members of our society, when we teach our own children in our own family, for example, and we try to analyze the content of what we teach, we can come up with a list of properties also. So in a way, when we try to spell out what are the what are the moral virtues that are normally expected of, you know, us, you know, in members of human society, we can, you know, fairly come up with fairly consistent sets of properties, like, you know, honesty and compassion and so on. So perhaps we can use this model and try to put this model onto an AI system, because after all, and I'm not alone in this. There are engineers, and I got this idea from people who have been working on moral machines, ethical AI, and so on. You know, alignment of virtues in AI and so on, where they aim at teaching AI or installing these properties into the AI system. So
right. What I think though is one of the concerns is, right, the question of moral virtues is couched within the broader context of what is the purpose of the moral life. So to take, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but Buddhism, the goal is to escape the cycle of samsara. And so cultivating a life that is in accord with the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths helps us to escape this. But that's something that's inherent to us. It's not something that the AI is subject to, unless we're going to say that the AI is subject to samsara.
Yes. I agree with that. You know, there is a world of difference between ourselves and machines like AI. But my point is only that when we talk about AI ethics, and when we are thinking about the kind of theory or what way of thinking systematically of what AI ethics consists of, perhaps we can look at this model of there being the ultimate endpoint. And you talked about Buddhism, of course, you know, enlightenment, you know, being free from suffering. And the Buddha has laid out very clearly steps that one must take in order to achieve eventually at this endpoint. So perhaps we could interpolate this model onto a way of thinking of AI ethics in such a way that there is this ultimate endpoint, you know, AI that ultimately good can be, you know, an ideal way of thinking about that, but it's there, and steps must be taken by the AI system so that we know which way the AI system must be oriented toward. That's the way. Yeah.
Rachel.
Yeah, thanks so much for your paper. I just wanted to ask about the part of your paper where you're considering Elon Musk's suggestion about having AI with non-liberal values. And as far as I understand, you argue we should just develop virtuous, not vicious AI. But I wondered, might there be some value, at least educational value, to having versions of AI which encode different values, which might not be necessarily vicious or evil. So I'm thinking of like AI chatbots, which at the moment we have, which represent different philosophers or people of the past, and certainly not all of those are going to be liberal, have liberal values. So yeah, I was just wondering, would it be okay to have non-virtuous or at least non-liberally coded AI, as long as we're more specific or open about what values are encoded in each system?
Right. I think what we are after is ethical AI, and by an ethical AI, at least the common the necessary, very necessary condition for an ethical AI is that it does not create divisions or hate or kind of incite people to become like hateful to one another, and by installing such negative virtues as hatred, opposite of compassion or opposite of honesty and so on, it can be done, but the result would be not what people normally want to have in a machine, and that will be a clear representation of something that regulators might be on the lookout for. I think you can have it, hypothetically in a confined space, you can do. But once you release it to the wild, to the public, and it has a very, very dangerous potential. And we have seen much of these examples already, like the Tay chatbot by Microsoft that was released some years ago. It didn't have any programmed illiberal values that you talked about, but it absorbed kind of whatever it took. So,
Susan.
Thank you for this paper. I really enjoyed it. I feel like there's so much kind of packed in there. The part I wanted to ask you about was the AI monk chatbot. I hadn't heard of that example, and I found it really interesting. And so it's that part of the paper where you're kind of considering whether AI and AI chatbots like this might actually help humans acquire virtue. And I guess it got me thinking, I wanted to hear your thoughts about, I suppose, like, to what extent can it do that? Like, is an AI chatbot the same as having like a kind of teacher in ethics or in virtues? Or is an AI chatbot the same as like reading a book on virtue and ethics? Or does it do something more, or is it actually maybe less helpful? And the reason I'm curious about this is I was, I guess, thinking from the kind of Aristotelian way of thinking about virtue, where it's we should have these kinds of moral skills that we cultivate and practice. And so when you think about an AI chatbot, that requires a user to sort of prompt it with a question. But maybe that already presumes that we have some of that moral skill of being able to tell, like, so what are the morally salient features of this situation, such that I should ask the question to the chatbot in this way and get an actual useful, informative response. Because sometimes, like, well, if we don't know that we don't know, then we're not going to phrase the prompt or the question in the right way. And so I guess, like, yeah, I was curious, like, how optimistic are you about AI's potential to help us acquire virtue? Is it in line with other kinds of things we have, or is there maybe something special or unique about it that goes above and beyond, like just reading books or like having role models to sort of follow for good practice? Like, does it do something different? Yeah, I guess I just wanted to hear you say more about that.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. That's a very good question, and it started me thinking in a new way. If the student does not know anything, if she's completely tabula rasa from the beginning, she does not know how to ask the question. She does not know her own motivation, because someone should have some motivation. You know, I'm going to this teacher, I'm searching for an answer to this question I already have, but there must be a question that has motivated the student to ask in the beginning. In that sense, I don't know how, or perhaps could be far into the future where AI can really take place of the kind of socialization and early education that must be in place for a student to really understand, you know, what kind of questions that she might want to ask. And yeah, and the whether AI can perform better than a book or some earlier forms of technology, I think that depends on, I mean, we can look at ChatGPT and we can imagine someone discussing with ChatGPT about, you know, the teaching of the Buddha. And of course, it's a large language model, so it contains perhaps all already, you know, of the extant published, printed teachings of the Buddha, voluminous, but it's still there. And it's conceivable, I have not done it myself, but it's conceivable that ChatGPT could, because it refers to this voluminous published teachings of the Buddha. So it's conceivable that ChatGPT could give some kind of accurate answer to some factual questions regarding the teaching. But as to how the system, the like ChatGPT can interpret and to how it can adapt the teaching so as to fit the individual need of this particular user who is prompting it, that's another question. I don't think it can do that right now.
Okay, Chung Hyung, and I think we can also start, if people are interested in moving after Chung Hyung and DK ask their questions, just sort of transition naturally into the general Q&A session that's coming up. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Soraj.
Hi.
Good to see you again, and I'm very happy
Nice
to
to meet you
continue our
again.
conversations. Yeah, and I like your idea that AI monk helps humans to become virtuous. I like that, and even if it doesn't have self-consciousness. And my question is, if AI works that way, so AI, even without self-consciousness, can help humans to become virtuous, can we say that it is already virtuous in its own way? For one may say that it is aligned with virtual principles. So in this respect, I also note that you expand the concept of virtue even to non-conscious entities, something like virtuous horse, virtuous car. But at one point you do not say that. You say also no virtue. Your book cannot be virtuous. I think there's some self-contradiction. So I cannot quite understand why book is only a medium, not virtuous. But anyway, so if AI monk can help humans to become virtuous, I think it is already virtuous. I think you may say like that. So I wonder how you would respond to this question.
Let me try to rephrase your question. So the question is whether an AI monk, as in my example, can become virtuous in itself, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Well, right now it is not, because right now there are real human beings behind the AI monk page who pretend to be AI and pretend to give their own answers on behalf of the virtual monk of the AI monk. But as I answered Susan earlier about the role of large language models such as ChatGPT or some other forms of such kind, it is possible to an AI system to generate its own autonomous answer because there is no human being behind ChatGPT, and it can generate its own answer. And we can debate whether that exhibits, sentience or consciousness. But I don't think as of now that this ability of taking statistical correlations between the prompting language and the answers does exhibit virtue in the sense that we normally understand, because they don't understand. I mean, they are just taking cues from the question and provide its own answer according to its own kind of way of doing things, statistically speaking. So in that sense, it is not, we have to be careful about the term virtue, and as because we seem to look at human virtues, and we perhaps sometimes look at systems such as AI or ChatGPT, and we wonder whether it does exhibit human virtues, understanding, consciousness, and so on. They cannot right now. As of now, they cannot. And it's an open debate whether it really can, far into the future. But having said that, it has its own virtues in the broader sense of, having the properties that are expected of them. In that sense, we can say that it has, virtues in its own kind. It's in its own sense, in a way. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
DK.
Okay, thank you. And I really appreciate for your inspirational paper, and then especially your openness to technology, of incorporating this technology into positive way of having a dialogue with theological and religious studies. I have not found many colleagues who are positive to these kind of technologies. So I really appreciate it. And when I was first reading your paper, I found myself a little bit disagreeing with you in terms of this AI technology can actually help to make some religious and spiritual relationship with human beings. But when I heard your talk today, that you seem to confine your positive judgment in terms of this AI technology within these kind of AI chatbots. So if I'm mistaken, please correct me. But what I'm thinking in my mind is going beyond these AI chatbot softwares. I'm thinking of Japanese robot, Mindar, or some other robots, Pepper, created by SoftBank Robotics. And now it is serving as a funeral kind of priest to help other people to, do these kind of funeral ceremonies. So my question to you is, are you also positive to this kind of humanoid robots, or you are critical in terms of going beyond AI technology, beyond this software-based AI?
Yes, thanks a lot. There is a temple in Thailand where the temple has put up a robot monk, so to speak, not as sophisticated as the Japanese one, but he's a robot nonetheless, and the robot can move, and the robot is placed on a ring, and the ring kind of moves around, so the robot moves around, and in the vicinity of the robot there is a loudspeaker putting out sermons, recorded sermons by the previous abbot of the temple. So people can imagine that it is the monk robot who is speaking and trying to understand the words of that are there for them to listen. So in that case, it's a very unsophisticated technology, but it's there. So the point is that when we have a robot, and when we can imagine a robot taking in a question and providing answers autonomously, not like the what is happening in the Thai temple that I was just talking about. It requires a lot of technology, and I'm not a computer scientist, but my thinking is that in order for such a robot to be able to accomplish this task of autonomously responding to questions, they must follow the same kind of trajectory as the large language models are doing, because they need to refer back to this volume of data that is there in their kind of memory, in order for the robot to provide answers. But that is for the engineers to think about. And my point is that if that is the case, then there is not much of a kind of a systematic difference between the ChatGPT that we engage with, on the computer screen, and in the robot. It's just a form of hardware, right? Unless there is a way to engineer the robot so that the robot can understand spoken language on its own, without relying on the same way of engineering as the large language models. But I have no knowledge about that. That's engineering question.
Oh, the reason that I bringing up this question is because this spirituality is more than what you just talked about in this paper. So you were skeptical in the sense that people are longing for some kind of virtuous AI who is self-conscious. But the desire that we want to make some humanoid robot in terms of religious priest is some kind of connected to our desire of spirituality, that we do not just receive some kind of spiritual instructions and information from AI chatbots. Rather, human seems to desire more than that. And that is making some humanoid robots of some religious priests. I don't know if I make it sense to you, but
yeah, thank you. I understand your question this way. It's the same kind of motivation that led people in the past, that led Buddhists in the past to build, numerous statues of the Buddha. So they want to have some kind of physical representation so that they can venerate. Of course, Buddha statues are made of bronze or stone or whatever, but people don't worship the bronze or the stone. People worship the representation that is there. And people worship the Buddha represented by those bronze statues. So perhaps, you know, we are speculating when a group of Buddhists build, you know, a monk robots, for example, or a robot Buddha, a Buddha statue that can speak, that can actually respond to questions autonomously. That's an idea. Perhaps you know, some my engineering friends might, you know, have an idea to doing that. It's perhaps it's the same kind of motivation to get people to get closer to the Buddha, so to speak, and that can help them to become a better Buddhist in the same way as in the past. You know, when people use the bronze technology to build, you know, a bronze statue of the Buddha, people feel that they get closer to the Buddha, and they can perhaps become a better Buddhist.
Thank you.
Yong Sup Song.
Doctor, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Actually, yeah, I'm
Yes.
just logged in, actually in Israel. I'm in Jerusalem now, so I couldn't turn on my video because I'm just sharing my hotel room with my another colleagues, so just apologize it. Thank you, Dr. Hongladarom. It's a great lecture. And actually, I had a question very similar with the first previous two questions. So I just raised my hand and then this down, but maybe I can differentiate just a little bit. And I think I need your clarification. Actually, I am totally agree with your argument that AI must be virtuous. I actually agree with that. But my question is related to your separation. Probably separation is your consciousness from virtuous AI. And so with your third question, I think that consciousness is very or sentient. Consciousness is very closely related the idea of virtuous person or virtuous agent, because traditionally, as we know, in order for us to be a virtuous person, the person should be subjective or should be moral agent, right? So he should be, as you just pointed out, he should be autonomous moral agent who can determine something moral issues subjectively. So in my idea, it is very closely related with consciousness, but you seem to, you know, confine it, or at least for your argument, you just separate it. It seems to be so. Isn't it, or how would you reconcile this traditional ethics with your understanding of virtue and consciousness? I think I'm just still thinking that, you know, AI should be conscious to be actually called virtuous. It's actually different from for us to regard AI as virtuous one, even if it is not actually. So, but for the true, for the true sense, what I'm talking is that I think AI should be conscious for to be virtuous, so that it's a little bit far away from now. Thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot for your question. I think as I have answered, especially Levi's question earlier, people seem to be using the term virtue into different but related senses. On the one hand, there are human virtues, moral virtues, compassion, beneficence, magnanimity, and so on. And on the other hand, there are virtues for other things which are not human beings, such as the virtue of a horse. People nowadays using English language don't talk about virtues of a horse any longer unless they study Aristotle. But my argument is that we should look back because Aristotle's ethics has very much in common with Buddhist ethics. I don't know why, but there are quite a lot in common, especially here where the emphasis is on cultivating oneself in order to achieve the goal. Could be eudaimonia, could be enlightenment, different words, but the structure is the same. So at least what I'm talking is that there are two different, but these two senses of virtue are very much related, because when we talk about the human virtues, compassion, magnificence, magnanimity, beneficence, and so on, we're talking about what kind of properties that could make the human being the best that he or she can be. And that is the same way of thinking about the virtue of a car or a horse that Aristotle talked about. Because when we talk about the virtue of a horse, we're talking about what kind of property that the horse could possess in such a way that it can be the best horse that it can be. And of course, being could be anthropocentric. The best horse is the best for us, because we look at the horse, and so it is healthy and it can run fast and so on. So perhaps the important sense is where these two seemingly different meanings of virtue are related. So especially when we look at human virtues in terms of the list of properties that could lead the human being to achieve the main goal of being a human being in the first place. And in Buddhism, there is this overriding concern of being trapped in samsara, and the main goal of a human being is to find a way to be released from samsara to achieve permanent real happiness. And the properties that could that will facilitate this progress toward this goal are the human virtues. So people must become compassionate in order to arrive closer to the goal. If they are the opposite of, if they are kind of selfish, they kind of move away opposite to the goal. So with this in mind, I will the answer to your question is that when we look at the AI system, of course, it's not conscious right now, but it can possess a list of properties in the sense that I talked about earlier, in the sense that those could be the properties that would make an AI system the best that it can be of its own kind. And of course, we are the creator and we are the users of the AI system. So the best that an AI system could be must be the best for us, must be the best for us. And the best for us, is what an ethical AI system could be. It does not, or it tries to eliminate biases as far as it's possible. That is an example. So yeah, that's the answer.
Woktu, did you want to jump in?
Oh, yeah. Well, Soraj, thank you for your presentation. I've listened to your paper and read your paper. I have a question, but I want to go to Susan and then come back because I have to give him some time to rest. Can I do that, Rita? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I have Susan, please? Susan, I'm very inspired by your paper. I mean, yeah, last week I read your paper and I didn't really knew that the time was running. So I would have one more question because I didn't want my question to be repetitive. So, well, human beings are biased and have some intentional when they think. You do know that. So when you talk about spontaneous freedom, would it be possible to get rid of all the biases and the intentions within the human consciousness in order to exercise and reach to the goal of spontaneous freedom? That was my curiosity.
Ooh, yeah. This is a deep question. I mean, I don't think we can actually really fully escape our own biases. And I also don't think that for an experience of spontaneous freedom that we're like escaping kinds of influence. Like, I think there's still influence there, right? Like if you're, one of the examples in Gingrich's paper is this guy, Peter, who's walking along this, he finds himself in a new city that he's visiting and he doesn't have any plans for the rest of the evening. And so he just gets to like walk around and take it all in. And it's kind of this open question, like, cool, like I'm just going to walk down the streets and see, where the wind takes me, that kind of feeling. And yet it's like, well, this city is still designed in a certain way, right? Like there's shops on this one main city center, right? And so like, of course, your eye is going to be drawn to, and so I think we're still kind of at the hands of external influences and even maybe like subconscious internal influences. Although I think that's maybe compatible with at least having the kind of subjective experience of a spontaneous freedom. And then, trying to separate these kinds of veridical experiences where it's like, in fact, seems like what we're having is spontaneous freedom versus we at least feel like that, even if it might not in fact be the case that that's what's happening. Like maybe we really don't have an uncertain future, but in our mind, it seems that way. And maybe that's enough to have the experience. But then trying to figure out, does that mean that like when we're wrong about that, about maybe the openness criterion, for instance, is that like a less meaningful case of spontaneous freedom, or does it still count for something? And is it still something worth preserving? Because it is hard to think then like, yeah, we're never really in this kind of totally unstructured or uncertain environment, whether that be because of internal factors or external ones.
So would there be any guidelines towards having more additional measures towards achieving the spontaneous freedom?
Yeah, so I don't say more about like what else we would need to do to preserve it, although like for Gingrich, he's laid out a few of these that I think are important, because he's like, well, look, there's all sorts of things that maybe like are obstacles for it, or some things that like enhance our ability to experience it. He's like, look, if you don't have certain kinds of means available to you, or you're like, burdened by lots of obligations, well, then you're not going to have that kind of feeling of openness. Like if you have a full packed schedule and like no breathing room, it's like, well, then, but he also like comes up with some interesting examples of like oppressive social norms and saying, well, these are things that even internally can kind of make things subjectively unavailable to us. And so, even in certain kinds of societies or cultures, it might be more difficult for people to have this kind of experience. And that's, not even talking about the online context, but I do want to think more about like, well, then what does that mean for the online context? How much of what he says actually carries over or not? So, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Can I have a question to Soraj?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sorry, you've been talking for a long time, but I need to ask you this question because my curiosity is keeping on lingering. You talked about virtue and arete, and that's my field. So I have a question here. You were talking about AIs. Excuse me, I have to have the paper here. Yeah, you talked about arete. You talked about that AIs are designed in a functional way and you had in your paper that we people, human, who designed AI should have the responsibility and accountability of the task. I really understand what you're talking about, but don't we have to think about, for example, if we humans design an AI for like weapon system, for example, and we're talking about arete in terms of weapon system, and we don't ask AI for anything to be ethical, or we don't ask him to like micromanage any stuff. They're just told what to do. But AI is like progressing and advancing, that they should, have some sort of a partial portion of decision making. I mean, you wouldn't know that. So in my view, I think that don't we have to have some sort of a room for ethicality for like AIs in order to like, run this program and for the AIs to have little small decisions on the task? That was my question. So you were talking about arete too focused on functional part of AI. Don't you think that arete could be applied to ethicality of AI? So that's my question.
Yes. A very important question. Thanks for raising this up. Just a short answer, because it's 7:45 and no, I haven't had breakfast yet. But anyway, we can go on if need be. By talking about arete, virtue, of course we cannot limit ourselves to the role or the function of a system as it is designed in a narrow sense. What I mean is that, of course, we can design an autonomous weapon system that is very efficient and so on, achieving its goal and its function of its designer. But when we look at the role that such a weapon system will play in the larger sense, when it is released, it can create untold miseries and so on. So in that sense, it fails in the broader sense of virtue, because it is a killing machine. And as such, a killing machine cannot exhibit any kind of virtue if it is, because it will destroy a lot of human beings. So when we talk about the virtue and the functional sense, human beings as a whole have its own function, so to speak, is because we want to survive. Of course, we can design, we can link up, God forbid, an autonomous system to a nuclear weapon, nuclear stockpiles and arsenal, and that could be the end of all of us. So that runs against all the virtues, because that would prevent anybody from achieving their own ultimate goal, whether it's eudaimonia or enlightenment. So that's a short answer to your question.
Okay, thank you.
Hoi Pim Kim.
Hello, everybody. Very nice meeting you. I'm from Seoul, and I have enjoyed your talk. Impressive. My question is a short question, maybe feedback to Soraj, Dr. Hongladarom. Okay. In your introduction to yourself, it said your concern is very much related to so-called third world countries. Here I see maybe CTNS is organized for Seoul conference, focusing on Asian reflection on AI. But interestingly, most of participants here are from global north, first world, including South Koreans, I guess. So you mentioned about ChatGPT and AI. AI is right now kind of warfare. Who can lead and capture the market? It is capitalistic warfare right now. Under this situation, Soraj, what will you can add from third world perspective on this kind of issue, virtuous AI or virtue kind of AI? But most of the AI development and the discourse is based on first world elite technocrat. So maybe Asia is one place we can argue against, criticize that kinds of grand paradigm. So you already mentioned you have a strong interest in third world perspective. What will be? I don't hear yet your presentation so far.
Well, Thailand is usually classified as third world, but we like to look at ourselves more as a middle income country. Well, I think what I have contributed to the global discussion is, a perspective from Buddhism, which is the main religion of the Thai people, and the need for kind of a global equality. Of course, we have not talked about that because that is not the question. That is not in the topic of the discussion we are having right now. But the perspective from Thailand being, a member of the Global South is what I have been presenting. I think I have done that for like some time right now. Perspective from Buddhism and the discussion on Buddhist ethics, which is which, as I said, has much in common with the ancient Greek wisdom, with Aristotelian and Stoic ethics, and so on. So that is. But as for global development and economics, I think we, and the role that AI can play in promoting economic development. I mean, there are many seminars on that already. But I think our focus is on virtue and spirituality and so forth.
Thank you very much. Yeah, as a slight tease, I do think that the two papers we'll hear after the break will touch upon some of those sort of global and economic concerns as well. And I think there will be a couple other places within the conference that pops up. Just before we take a quick break, I do want to at least acknowledge the questions that we're seeing in the chat here. And to Renand, I think that there's no one single answer to that. And I think if anybody feels free to chime in terms of answering that or discussing that in the chat, that's great. Previously, before I had this position, I was also adjuncting at Santa Clara, where Susan and where Brian Green and the attendees are, and they are trying to integrate ethics education into the engineering curriculum. So I think there's a variety of ways you can do that. You can sort of systematically within the curriculum. There's also active research that's being done to incorporate virtue sort of machine learning perspectives into programming itself. I was at a conference for the International ISSR, the International Society for Science and Religion, that just had a conference on spiritual and artificial intelligences, where there are two graduate students from Switzerland that are trying to use are going to try and test this fall as sort of a virtue subroutine into a machine language, large language model, to try and say, well, this answer might be more virtuous to this kind of perspective than this would be. So that's one way to do it. We have a participant from a Rome conference who's written about trying to put into mathematical terms what the role of friendship in virtue ethics and virtue acquisition might be. I'm not a mathematician to really understand the hard math about it, but I think it's a fascinating idea. And so I think there's a lot of active work in trying to be done in terms of how do we think about incorporating this into curriculum and also into the programming itself. There was a team from Arizona State who had a paper at our Berkeley conference that are looking at dispositions of drivers and how that might be programmable in the way that we look at autonomous vehicles in times where we might want to be more aggressive, or times we might want to be more considerate or benevolent on the road. So a brief answer to that, we are running a little behind. So I think I'm going to recommend we take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back and start the next session about 5 minutes late. So thanks for a great start, and we'll see you in about 10 minutes.